Hello again, everybody, with the Packers Savant. I'm Tom Pippins, and we are delighted to bring you Packers Talk right here on WisconsinSportsStream.com. We have a video podcast called The Tom Pippins Show, or just Google Tom Pippins Show or TomPippins.com. Right now, we want to talk about the green, and so much has happened with the Pack, obviously, and so many, well, if this or if that, and to me, the biggest dynamic might be, obviously, keeping number 12 healthy, but also how is he going to work with new head coach Matt LaFleur? On the surface, it seems you've got a veteran who's used to doing it a certain way. He's brilliant, he's creative, and he wants to stay that way. And Matt wants to have him be a little bit more disciplined, stay in the pocket, and do certain things. Can they come to a meeting of the minds? I know it's the honeymoon stage right now, John. So far, so good. But this, to me, has the chance to get complicated at the very least, if not dicey at times.
That's going to be the $64,000 question. You're absolutely right. I think somebody's going to have to adapt, and I think it's going to have to be Matt LaFleur. The reason I say that, and that's different than I've seen this happen a couple other times. 1992, when Holmgren came on board, Brett Favre was the quarterback, and he was kind of the wild colt that had to be broken and structured in this offense. It took Mike Holmgren 3 years to structure him, and when he finally bought into the structure, he was MVP in 95, 96, and 97. Then Mike Holmgren left, and so did the structure. So Brett Favre then, he's the gunslinger, and if you asked his opinion, Brett, do you think, what should we do? Brett Favre would say, I think we should throw deep. I mean, that's what you want me to, well, I'll do whatever you want.
Doesn't matter if you got 5 guys out there, in coverage, just throw deep.
So
make a play.
When Ray Rhodes took over, he deferred to Favre too much. And so did Mike Sherman, I thought. Mike Sherman was a little bit better than Rhodes in that respect, but surprisingly it puts more pressure. I thought it put more pressure on Favre that he had to do more things and be creative to get it done. So the structure, when Mike McCarthy came in 2006, he looked at all of Brett Favre's passes, his interceptions, his last 50 interceptions, found that 80% of them occurred when he threw late over the middle. And he said, Brett, what you have to do is not throw late over the middle. And that 2006 team, if you remember, started off 4-8. And he was throwing late over the middle, and it wasn't going. They had all these rookies in the offensive line. They had Greg Jennings. It wasn't working. It was a young team. Favre was bitter that Ted Thompson had let some people go for salary cap purposes. Darren Sharper and Mike Wall, I think, were the two. He didn't sign Marco Rivera. So 2005 was a bad deal. 2006, though, at the end of the year, they won their last 4 games, and that was the springboard for 2007, where they were 14-4. So in the last 22 games that Brett Favre played, he won 18 of them. Why? Because Mike McCarthy structured Brett Favre again in a way that he could be successful. And when I interviewed, years ago when I had my radio show, I interviewed David Marinis, who wrote the Vince Lombardi book. Ironically, it was in your office at Fox 6 because the only time I could interview him was at the Fox 6 early morning show with Mark Concannon, I think had it at the time. So it was 6:15 in the morning. I'm in your office, and I'm interviewing David Marinis, and I said, what's the key to Vince Lombardi? And he said, freedom through structure. You run that power sweep over and over and over again, and pretty soon Jim Taylor has the freedom to do this and that. Or if the linebacker does this, you block it this way, you run that way. So you are successful minimizing error through the structure. So that being said, you would think that Aaron Rodgers should be limited within that structure. I think he's such an exceptional talent that I think the structure has to be changed to allow for his talent. When I go to the opposing locker room and I talk about Packer wide receivers, the defensive backs aren't impressed with the Packer wide receivers. They're impressed with the fact that Aaron Rodgers can get outside the pocket and extend plays and force them to plaster their cover guy an extra 4 or 5 seconds sometimes, and that's almost impossible to do. Jordy Nelson, I thought Jordy Nelson was a great example. If he had come up with the Chicago Bears and was with Jay Cutler, Jordy Nelson wasn't always open on the first and second option on the route. And then by then, Cutler's either sacked or he's thrown the ball away. But Jordy Nelson was a Hall of Fame player from the third option to the fifth option, and when Rodgers would go outside the pocket, he knew exactly what Rodgers was looking at, and he would make incredible plays on the sidelines, down deep. And Mike McCarthy allowed that, allowed the talent of Rodgers to kind of make all the players more valuable. I think that's what LaFleur is going to have to do. You're paying Rodgers, what, $33 million or $30 million a year? But he's a special player who can make everyone else more valuable. So yes, structure him, but allow him the freedom to make everybody else better.
And yet there has to be a balance, because as we saw last year, and some of it I understand, stayed play calling by McCarthy. They've been together so long it was time for the divorce. Rodgers is smart, as you say. A lot of people think that some of that blame, if not the lion's share, should have gone on the shoulders of number 12. He's smart enough to know that he doesn't want his legacy to be somebody who was a malcontent, who couldn't get along with quarterback, was too egocentric, et cetera, et cetera. So I would hope he would walk toward LaFleur a little bit as well, especially since, as we tape here, LaFleur has the ACL. It's going to take him a while to get healed up. But I think if there's a combination, the two of them can really make hay, which I think would get us transitioning into the offense. And how much is being relied upon in terms of the growth of the rookie receivers, taking that, as McCarthy used to say, that big step in year two?
Well, the big step in year two, you look at Greg Jennings, James Jones, you look at the players. This is still the West Coast offense. It's just a slightly different version where they're going to run a little bit more and they're going to use the tight ends more. And Marquez Valdez-Scantling impressed the heck out of me last year. In fact, I don't know if you remember, there was a play in the San Francisco game where Rodgers went out of the pocket.
This is something only he can do, ladies and gentlemen. This mind of his is amazing.
I'm just happy that someone wants to listen to it. So thank you. He went out of the pocket, I think it was in the second quarter, and he made a signal, and Valdez-Scantling then went in a certain way, and the ball came right over the defensive back's head, and Valdez-Scantling was there. I thought, hey, this guy's getting it, just starting to. And it's baby steps, because I'm sure those receivers get overwhelmed, because he goes to the line and they have a run call and a pass call. And he can call which direction it's going to go. Is it going to be the run? Okay. Which direction? Is it the pass? Which direction? And he's signaling, and every signal is different, because there's so much transition in the NFL that there might be a Packer in the defensive back, and they see a signal or whatever, and they'll in the defensive backfield, and they'll be able to know what they're doing. But I think Kumaro is very good and young.
Rodgers loves him, doesn't he?
He loves him. EQ St. Brown is very good. Jamon Moore was the one that I talked to Montgomery before he got traded, and he said that Moore was the best route runner of them. He just was thinking too much. He's dropping a lot of balls. He might be the wild card in this, but now Trevor Davis is having a good camp so far. And Trevor Davis, I remember when Hub Arkush talking about him. He was Hub Arkush, the Bear fan, but he evaluates talent. When Thompson got Trevor Davis in the 5th round from Cal, he was really surprised, because he had him as a 2nd or 3rd round talent. And he's had a lot of hamstring issues and was a great returner. I'm wondering if he can be the guy, the jet sweep guy that Randall Cobb, as he got older and kind of beaten down and lost his speed, he couldn't be the jet sweep guy. So with Rodgers, I don't know if it was Rodgers' fault or if it was the fault of Rodgers. Looked pretty darn good in 2011 with Jordy Nelson, Jermichael Finley, James Jones, Donald Driver, and Greg Jennings. That was the best offense in my Packer tenure in the 40 years I've covered the Packers, and the #1 offense in the NFL. So that has definitely dropped down. But I think with these players, they're lanky, they have some speed. But I think Rodgers, you got to let him go outside the pocket, and you got to keep him intellectually interested at the line of scrimmage. And some of the linebackers would say they would be making changes at the line, and Rodgers would be staring at them with a smile on his face and make a signal, and he would totally adjust, and he would totally know what to do. They've counteracted that by defenses are now making changes just split second before the snap count. So they want Rodgers to make a signal, then they're going to change. So, it's a chess match on the field, but you're giving Rodgers all that money, and I think get the most you can out of him. And
well, the window is short, too. As you were saying, it took McCarthy, originally it took Mike Holmgren 2 or 3 years. Well, we don't have that kind of time if you're a Green Bay Packers fan, right? I mean, they absolutely have to come out of the gate and have all cylinders running if they're going to compete and contend against a couple of years. I think Packers fans are getting antsy, to say nothing of the executives there at 1265. Jimmy Graham is back. There have been draft picks at tight end. They signed a tight end not too long ago. Do you think that this team has upgraded on the offensive side of the ball, John, in terms of talent?
I think they have. It's this team over the last 4 or 5 years has been just decimated by injuries, and it seems like the injuries are all at one position. They're not a little bit here and a little bit there. When they played the Bears last year in December, the Packers had 17 players on the injury report. And these were legitimate injuries. This wasn't the New England Patriots trying to say there's a hangnail or something like that. Sometimes they do that to make a point. These were legitimate injuries, and so there's 17 injuries for the Packers, and there's 2 for the Bears. So the Bears had a really good season last year, relatively injury-free. The Packers did last in 2014. 2014, they had the same 22 starters from week 1 as in the title game. They played Seattle week 1. They played Seattle in that final game that I won't get into, but all the starters were the same, except for I think A.J. Hawk might have been subbed because he kind of hit the wall at the end of that year. But that was remarkable. I think on offense, one of the keys last year was the guard play. Taylor had the left guard had the ankle injury, and he never recovered from that in the offseason. He sat out of camp, missed some camp. And then the right side was a turnstile, the right guard situation. And just this year, they added Turner from Denver in free agency. He's put in at the right guard. They drafted a guy named Jenkins in the second round, at the top of the second round.
Very versatile, isn't he, John?
Very versatile. He played center in college, but he's wowed him at left guard, and he's big and he's very athletic. So I think they might have, and then they have Taylor coming back hopefully with a healthy
Bulaga?
ankle.
Yeah, how about Bulaga, though? There's a wild card on that right side. When he's healthy, once more, availability, accountability, you've got to be healthy. When he's healthy, he's very good, but that's been an issue with Brian, who's only, I think, 30 years old. It's not as if he's over the hill by any means, but his body may be the body of a 40-year-old.
Right, I rely on, I do some work for the radio, Packer with Wayne Larrivee, and sometimes you learn a lot by just listening. And Mark Tauscher will come in for the pregame, and Larry McCarron does the game. So I'll listen to what they have to say. And it's universal. Those offensive linemen love Brian Bulaga when he's healthy. When he's healthy, he's one of the top 5 right tackles in the league. Can he be healthy? The interesting move was getting Turner. They can move Turner from right guard to right tackle if needed. The other interesting thing was they had a player that they drafted in the 5th round last year named Cole Madison. He was from Washington State, and he had just a horrible experience where there was a quarterback for Washington State that committed suicide. It really impacted the offensive line there, and he sat out last year. Well, he's back, and he respects the Packers a lot for allowing him to stay out that year when he wasn't ready to play football. But I saw him in the Senior Bowl, and he looked very impressive.
And he's a tough-as-nails kind of guy. I'm glad you brought it up because he really is, in a sense, another draft pick for him.
bonus
Because
pick.
I think people were wondering, would he be able to come back after such a setback, emotionally, mentally?
And he can play right guard, left guard, right tackle, and they're putting him at center. So they want, since the 53-man roster goes down to say 46 on game day, they have to make sure that the offensive lineman can play multiple positions. And I think the guard spot, which was a problem last year, I think they might have solved it. And now Corey Linsley's not playing in OTAs. I wonder what that all. But he has hamstring and back issues periodically, so hopefully there's nothing serious there. Bakhtiari, one of the top 3 left tackles in the NFL. They cannot. I mean, it's Rodgers 1, can't have him get hurt. Bakhtiari is 1A. You can't have those people hurt.
Somebody asked me the other day, well, they're saying Devontae Adams is the most valuable player on the team. I said, wait a minute now. It all starts and ends with a quarterback, as good as number 17 is. John, let's talk briefly about running backs. Is there enough there, and I want to get into the defense in the time that we have. Is there enough there? Aaron Jones, we know he's very gifted, but he's slight. I know he's gotten healthy and he's eaten healthier and all that. Maybe that will help, but his knees are he's somewhat fragile. So do you have enough behind him to allow LaFleur to do what he wants to do? Because it appears that a big part of his offense centers around those running backs.
Well, I watched a lot of Notre Dame games over the years, and Dexter Williams is the running back.
Got Jamal Williams and then Dexter Williams.
Dexter Williams. And Dexter Williams is he's a big play home run guy who's quick. Aaron Jones, if he were durable, he'd be fantastic, but he's not. He's had 3 significant knee injuries in the 2 years he's played. So, and he's got very slight legs. They're trying to build his legs up. If he can play, or if they can play him in small doses, but they're happy with Dexter Williams. They think he's got something. But I think running back is something you can find on the street. You find like Cleveland is having trouble with their running backs. If they make a cut or make a trade, all of a sudden Duke Johnson could be available. You can find running backs, I think. But I think that running back doesn't bother me at all. I think the offensive line has been upgraded. I think they had to keep Graham because they just didn't have enough dead money space, salary cap wise. So they kept him. That was the best option. And his knee was bad last year and couldn't practice. And they drafted in the 3rd round Jay Sternberger from Texas A&M, and he dominated at the combine. Everybody was saying, "Look at Jay Sternberger, how quick he is!" But that was the combine. So he looked good in shorts and he was quick. What does that mean? Can he play? Can he block? We'll find out.
That offense, it will be very interesting to see how it shakes out. Obviously, they need a lot more than they had last year. But in the end, it'll also depend on that defense, John. You're as aware as anyone else. If you're going to win a Super Bowl, you have to have a good D. They haven't really been able to accomplish what they had since the last time they had a good defense, despite all the injuries in beating Pittsburgh in Super Bowl 45 back in 2010, the Super Bowl in 2011 in Big D. They've made a lot of changes there. It seems as if all of a sudden Mike Pettin, who was making chicken salad without having a lot to work with, well, now he has some components to work with between free agency and the draft. How good can this defense be, again, the if word, if everything comes together?
I think they can be very good. I was always high on Dom Capers. I thought when he had talent to work with, Nick Collins, Woodson, Tremont Williams was the number 1 cornerback. He was okay, but then as the talent eroded and Ted Thompson just didn't have the good drafts after the Super Bowl. And so I thought they signed Peppers, which was good, but he was putting on Band-Aids or putting his thumb in the dike, and there's multiple holes, and they couldn't stop the torrent. That's what I thought with Pettin. Pettin just didn't have the horses. And these quarterbacks are so smart now that if you play Drew Brees or you get Brady in a big game, and the fact that you can't, they look at the defenses, and you can't jam the wide receivers anymore, really. You can't touch them at the line of scrimmage. It's getting to be an arena football league kind of score So the only thing you can do is have speed and try to disguise your defense. And that's what Pettine is doing. He's disguising it because all of these guys they signed in free agent, the Smiths that they had, and drafting Rashawn Gary from Michigan. Gary can play defensive tackle, which he played against the Badgers for Michigan, defensive end, outside linebacker. So they can bring these guys in and they can have 6 or 7 guys in a line, and the quarterback isn't going to know if they're going to play a 3-4 or a 4-3 or who's coming. Is Gary coming outside, kind of like Khalil Mack?
If he stays healthy with that shoulder, they seem to be really excited about him. And as you
Yeah.
said, a lot of moving parts. You have the Smiths who came in free agency, so there's quite a bit that can get done there. They really upgraded the back. Is this a defense? Yeah, talk a little bit about that defensive secondary and maybe the key to the draft.
I thought Gutekunst should have received General Manager of the Year for getting a 4th-round pick at the trade deadline for Clinton-Dix. Clinton-Dix was a dynamic player on the rise until about 3 years ago, and then he just went straight down.
I don't know if the Pro Bowl went to his. He stopped hitting. I've never been so mystified. But so now all of a sudden you get that pick, and that's good. Is the key to the draft perhaps moving up to get Savage?
It could be, and he wowed the people. I've talked to media people, heard scuttlebutt from the players. His speed is very Nick Collins-like. Nick Collins took 3 years to get involved in the defense. He was from a small school, Bethune-Cookman. This guy, I think, is going to be quicker. He'll be ready to go. Savage, the free safety with speed, who can play the slot. And by playing the slot, you're able to disguise. Because if you see him, you go to the line of scrimmage, if you're a quarterback, oh, look at that. They're playing quarters. Whoa, he comes up and guards the slot because he has the speed to do it. So that'll be interesting. And getting Amos from Chicago. So last year they were safetyless. Bryce had the bad ankle. Clinton-Dix had 3 interceptions, but they all seemed to be tip balls that he just kind of dropped in his lap. And it seemed like when they traded him, they brought guys off the street that played at the same level that the other guys were playing at, which is that's not a good sign. But if they have 2 safeties who can play and make plays and with speed, Amos is more of a in-the-box type of player. But Savage, I guess, was going sideline to sideline making plays and just impressing everybody. So that's a player to look at. Rashawn Gary is fast. They can play him at multiple positions. And with him, the key is everybody says how disappointed they were in that his measurables show that he should be a better player than he was. Did Jim Harbaugh not use him correctly? That's the question. If that's the case, and Jim Harbaugh has other things to worry about than using Rashawn Gary, it's like, what if you're a coach? Hey, this is my scheme. Fit this role. If you can change the role to fit Rashawn Gary, you might have a really interesting player if he can stay healthy. And they gave him 52. They said because his number was 3 at Michigan, and 5 minus 2 is 3. And Clay Matthews had 52. But Khalil Mack also has 52. That's the one they're going to hope that maybe his lack of production at Michigan was due to Harbaugh and the scheme and how he was used. And if he stays healthy, maybe he should have been a top 5 player. But it's all about rushing the passer, and he can play multiple positions with all the Smiths that they have. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be with Kenny Clark.
Kenny Clark, who I think has the potential to be special if he stays healthy. He's ascending. See if Mike Daniels can stay healthy. I think as we wrap here, John, I'd like to ask you, how good can the defense be? And are you drinking Packer Kool-Aid if all these elements come to and they have to be healthy, especially a quarterback? Is this a team that is ready to contend again?
I think it's the cup is half full. I really think and they've done a lot to improve. There's one player that we haven't talked about that has to play. If he can play, and that's Kevin King. When Kevin King played last year, they beat the Bears in week 1. They played Minnesota in week 2, and they had 21-7. he pulled a groin muscle and left, and Minnesota ended up tying the Packers 29-29 because they couldn't stop, and they just picked on House, his sub. But they played at the Rams straight up and at New England straight up. If he can play at corner, and they can then put Alexander in the slot, and that's a whole different look. So, and King has not been able to play in the OTAs yet because of his shoulder. He's got chronic shoulder issues.
And yet, as you say, he is, when he's healthy, like a Bulaga, he performs.
When he came out in the draft, Sports Science on ESPN did a special on him. They compared him, ironically, with his reach and his height and his athletic ability to Kawhi Leonard. And Bucks fans like, oh, Kawhi Leonard. But he was at San Antonio at the time, and they said his reach radius and jumping ability is just like Kawhi Leonard's that they did in Sports Science. So there's a player there. Can he stay healthy? That's the key. I think they could be really good. They've added safety. They'll actually have a safety, two safeties that can make plays. And if King can play, they've rebuilt the cornerback position, and we'll see if with the speed, can they hide it and disguise it and rush the passer. I don't know. I just think that most of the NFL is 8-8, and the difference between 10-6 and 6-10 is a couple injuries. But I think they've gotten a couple of players that they might be able to look at the 11-12 wins.
One thing we know, it's going to be a lot of fun and very interesting. It always is when we're together, and it's been a privilege to be with you, John, on WisconsinSportsStream.com.